Hi, Pastor Nathan Decker with your hashtag Better Together devotion for today. And this week I'm talking about creating community, creating a tribe around yourself that helps you out in the most difficult of times. Now, a lot of times we want to say, oh, don't be cliquish, don't do that. And the difference between a clique and a group that loves one another and takes care of each other is how open they are to the outside edges, how they look out and look after one another and even those beyond their group. One of the things that we have to have is we have to show up for others and show up for one another if we're going to be a tribe called love, if we're going to be the church that God is calling us to be. Now in Romans, the book of Romans, Paul writes to the churches and tells them about this kind of love, about this kind of care for one another. He says love must be sincere in chapter 12, verse 9. Love must be sincere. And then he continues in verse 10 to say, be devoted to one another in affectionate love. Care for one another. Lift one another up. Have fervor about doing this. Never lack zeal. Keep your spiritual faith, serving God and one another. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. If we are going to be a group of people that truly are love and truly are tribal in terms of the way that we care for one another, we're going to create a common core center around that concept of love, about what it means to love. That's the that's the part we're never going to negotiate. We are going to love, but the outside fringes, the how we care for one another, the how we care for those that aren't within our group, well, that's permeable. That's a place where we encounter the world. That's a place where we don't have a high bar. We don't have a high standard. We will let anybody to come into the circle. In fact, we keep drawing the circle bigger and bigger and bigger, especially when we encounter someone who disagrees with us. We want to grow that circle, so we circle around them. Even when they draw a circle to cut us out, we draw a circle around their circle to say, you're in. This common love is so characteristic of the early church that it changed the way that all Western civilization would be. The early church can completely change the concept of what it meant to be loyal to one another, to be faithful to one another, to care for each other. If we follow what Paul is writing about in Romans, we'll find that we desire to live out loving thy neighbor. We find that we'll be desiring to live out, being known by love like Jesus told us to be. We'll find that we'll be living out the commandment that he told me that was the hardest one for me, at least in that Sermon on the Mount. We'll be loving even our enemies. Even those that persecute us, we will seek good for them. And by doing so, it will create a testimony to them. If we can be so good to other people who are denying us of all things, what greater witness? What greater love? Jesus said, than to lay down weapons, lay down words, lay down agendas, to love one another. Love's that common core, that core we hold on to, and love is the reason that we are permeable on the edges, to care and lift up one another. Amen.